Entire chromis of the domus.
The knock.
72-48 is the lead, and a big reason why is Dirk Nowitzki and his 19 points.
Unbelievable tonight.
The talk has been all season long that Dirk Nowitzki is high on the list of MVP candidates, if not the #1 MVP candidate. And with what his team done, it's hard to argue against him, but there is certainly a group of other guys that are very worthy as well, including the two-time winner, Steve Nash. So when you look at the list of who you have at the top of your MVP list, who are you going with?
Well, for me, I know that the guy to my left and my right are going with the two-time defending champ, and obviously he's more than deserving, but you know, people get caught up in stats. The stat I look at is 51-9.
Yeah.
And this is a guy that's got a team that's done things that's unprecedented. 3 multiple 12-game win streaks thus far this season, in the midst of a 16-game winning streak right now. And you can see a lot of times your greatness is not just defined in what you do individually, but it's really in a team game about what your team does collectively. And that's why, for me, Dirk Nowitzki's just been the MVP.
But let's be realistic. Phoenix is only 4.5 off of their pace. So,
you know, that's a great point.
That's almost a wash.
Well, it would be, except if you rewarded first and second place based on whether you won by 4.5 or half a game. If you finish first, you know, you don't get the same amount of kudos for finishing second, even though you only lose by a game.
No, my argument is that the guy who is on the first place team shouldn't get the most recognition as MVP just based on the fact that if he's the most valuable player in the league, then he's the most valuable player, not because, I mean, there's a time, you know, you've had guys on last place teams.
Not in the NBA.
Not in the NBA.
Baseball, that's
baseball,
not
which I could understand that one either.
But you can't.
Andre Dawson.
And you started off by saying, Greg, you can't argue against Steve Nash. You can't argue against Dirk Nowitzki either. I mean, this team's going to win 68 to 70, 71 games, somewhere in that range. I have no problem with a guy averaging 26 points and 10 rebounds as being the MVP on a team that wins almost 70 games. But for me, I still look at Steve Nash from a standpoint of how critical he is to what the rest of the guys on that team do. And we've seen it, how crippling it can be to them to try to run their offense effectively when Steve Nash isn't on the floor. But it's 6 one, half dozen the other. I think these guys are 1 and 1A. And whoever gets it absolutely deserves it. I don't have no problem whatsoever with Dirk Nowitzki winning the MVP this year. My vote would go to Steve Nash.
Yeah, the thing about it, though, for me, John, is you talk about value. We're in the business of winning. We're not in the business of looking good. And although the Phoenix Suns win and Steve Nash has been great, I still, you know, I give him credit in terms of Dirk Nowitzki because their team won. They're much better defensively. They played better against the top-tier teams in the league. And he's their best player. And this guy has come out and consistently played at a tremendously high level.
But to me, the most valuable player is, if you took that player off of the team, which team would suffer the most? And I think when you take Steve Nash out of Phoenix's lineup, and we saw them play an entire game without Steve Nash, they're not even close to the same team.
So what you're saying, if Dirk Nowitzki misses, he's got to miss 3 games and they go 0-3, and then we would say, well, oh, Dirk Nowitzki should be the MVP.
No, that's not true. I'm just saying I think Phoenix would miss Nash.
And I don't completely agree with that argument from this standpoint. If you based it solely on that, LeBron James is the MVP of the league. Yeah. Because Cleveland might not get to 70 every night without LeBron James on the floor. But the thing is, when you talk about, you know, winning should determine MVP, I look at Steve Nash, what they've done, they win a lot of games. Now, he has not gotten to the finals, granted, but last year, I believe you said that you thought either Kobe Bryant or LeBron James was MVP. Neither one of those guys made it past the second round, and sometimes it's just very difficult to finally get your team over the hurdle and ultimately get to the finals.
Hair is showing great speed. Jim Gray, where do you weigh in?
I'm very interested in what you guys are saying here. I just want to throw out a name. Shaquille O'Neal. Look at what this guy's done since he's come back. I know he probably doesn't qualify in terms of games. Nobody wants to play him in the playoffs, and if he continues at this pace, is there a more valuable player? Is there a guy who's more important? Is there a guy who could put everybody on his shoulders and say, hey, let's go to the championship? But in terms of your argument, if you voted for Nash last year, how do you not vote for him this year? All of his numbers are up. Assists, points, victories.
Well, but I think if you're going to vote it again ultimately on victories, I'd say Dirk Nowitzki's numbers are up. And also, Dirk Nowitzki and the Dallas Mavericks beat them in a playoff series last year. And ultimately, I think when you look at real value, it's not about just how many more games your team has won. It's about, you made the point with Shaquille O'Neal, they're winning and playing for championships. And I think that ultimately is what we typically based our MVPs in the NBA on, are the teams that legitimately have a chance and go on to oftentimes win world championships.
Well, I'll tell you what, whoever wins it, like you say, is going to be deserving. And it's funny because Nowitzki and Nash are best friends, so I don't think they care.
You know what else is funny? You think about it, those guys were teammates.
Yeah.
And when they were together collectively, they couldn't accomplish nearly what they've been able to individually, and that's really ironic when you look at two guys who are unselfish and play the game of basketball the way they have. They've really prospered more so on their own than they did when they played together.
Yeah, that's a great point.
And you know what else is amazing is year after year we had the same argument, and pretty much it comes down to, well, Kobe Bryant's probably the best all-around player in the game. We've said that for the last 4 or 5 years. He doesn't have any MVP yet he has 3 rings.
Well, Shaq's got 1. You know, to the Jim Gray's point, he's won 4 world championships. He's got 1 MVP, which, I mean, again, MVP is as great as an award it is and great to argue about it. It's pretty subjective. There's a few MVPs.
Well, he won 6 of them in 20 seasons, you know. That's just on about a 30% clip.
Good ratio.
Not bad.
ESPN's special edition of the NBA, brought to you by Wade 2.0 and Converse, All In, and Taco Bell. Think outside the bun.
Welcome back. Let's check in again with our Jim Gray.
All right, John, thank you very much. I'm here with Lamar Odom of the Lakers. He's out. We're having a bit of a discussion, so let's get your opinion first on this. Who do you believe is the MVP in the NBA this year?
Well, of course, I'm a little biased. I felt like Kobe should have won it last year, and I think he is now. He's doing a great job as far as scoring and distributing the ball. And, of course, you got some other guys that are playing at a high level, such as Dirk and Steve Nash playing great.
So that would be A, B, and C, huh?
Yeah, that's my A, B, and C role, but I'm on the Lakers, and I'm always go with my guy.
Let me ask you about your shoulder. It's a torn labrum. It's the same thing that you had surgery on a couple of years ago when playing with the Lakers. Optimistic news was given to us before the game by Phil Jackson that you're expected back next week. How's your shoulder feeling?
Well, the strength has come back faster than it did last time. Most likely I'm going to have to get surgery, but hopefully I can put it off until the season's over and hopefully come back Thursday again at Denver.
Can you be effective, and were you effective last time when you didn't have the surgery before you came back to start to play?
Yeah, well, it's going to hurt, and I'm going to have to play through pain, but of course I could be effective, mainly because I can, do so many things on the court. I'm just going to have to focus, and, we're in a playoff run, and I want to play in the playoffs. So.
Lamar, is there anything that can be done that would further damage your shoulder by attempting to come back? Maybe, but I'm going to roll the dice a little bit. I'm going to go out there. As long as it's strong and I can support it, then I should be fine. Lamar, your team now struggling tonight, down by 29 points. They've struggled quite a bit since you've been gone. How frustrating is it for you and your teammates to be going through this?
Yeah, it's hard watching. Right now, we're at a low point, and hopefully I can come back and just give us a spark.
Lamar, we appreciate your time. Thanks for joining.
Anytime.
All right. Back to you, John.
Well, Jim, thanks a lot. The Lakers about to go 15-31 in the last 3 seasons when Lamar Odom does not play.
Well, he should get some mentions for MVP there.
Yeah, that's a great point. That is a great point.
The other thing about that MVP debate that we had, the other thing about it is Steve Nash might be the most valuable player for his team, but does that necessarily mean the most valuable player in the league? Well, I think, I like the fact that Dallas has done something historic.
I think it does, based on those parameters. When you talk about a team that is a contending team for a championship this year, to me, there's not a guy more responsible than Steve Nash for what happens to his team on every single possession. He really ultimately determines what happens with that team 80%, 90% of the time on a given night. No player in the league has that kind of offensive responsibility.
He does offensively, possibly, but again, that still doesn't make you the most valuable player in the league. And we had a discussion the other night with some of my old cronies and talking about as great as he is, when you start asking, who would you take? Would you take Dwayne Wade over Steve Nash? Would you take LeBron James? You had to start a team today. Would you take LeBron James or Steve Nash?
Well, no, but that's not. Obviously,
I'm
that's
just
not
asking a question.
No, but that's not the discussion.
Can I ask a question and get an answer?
Absolutely. Obviously, you take either one of those guys over Steve Nash.
Okay.
Is that the question? Who's the best player in the game?
It was the one I just posed.
Let me ask you this. Would you take Kobe or Dirk?
This year?
LeBron or Dirk?
This year, I take Dirk. I think Dirk's had more of an impact, man. Again, you know, a part of being a great player is allowing other guys and helping other guys have a huge impact on the game. Kind of like the argument you made with Steve Nash. I don't argue. The other thing that you got to remember too, Dirk. One of the things that's impressed me most, Dirk has a huge impact defensively now. And that also, you know, most of the teams I played on a lot of great teams. Defense is equally as important as offense. And I think that Dirk, that's why I like him as an MVP, because he's had so much more of an impact on the ball defensively.
Well, Nash leads Phoenix in charges taken.
And he's also had a good impact.
Ronnie Turiaf having an impact off the bench.
Not quite as much. If you were dyslexic, you could make the argument that the game is tied.